Can I help you?
Knowledge must be earned, Tenno.
Okay. Anyway, hello everyone. Um, Today I'm going to be explaining why I think Oberon is an unpopular warframe, despite thinking that he is a good warframe. Um, and to do that, I'm going to be using Necros as a point of comparison. Uh, I'm using Necros because I think he is the best comparison to show this, but I'll explain after I showcase this. So, if you look at my Necros build here, this is I should mention this is not my usual Necros build. I usually use a build that has Augur Reach and Augur Secrets. But I think this is going to be better for the comparison. I think this is more like what people would generally want to use, just for the crowd control and the tankiness, respectively. So what this build has to offer is basically you're tanky, you get good crowd control alongside reliable armor removal, and you basically have no energy issues because of a combination of these abilities, plus Nourish. And Nourish will also not only just be a raw damage buff, but it'll also buff your shadows. It's actually the point of the version of the build that uses the Augur mods. Miko, please. Miko, my dog is being uh, annoying. But anyway, if I can move him out of my way. Anyway, so you get basically, what was I? Oh yeah, I was saying that Nourish will also buff the shadows. So like the main point of the other version of the build is to actually have my shadows basically be as strong as possible. And so if you just look here, they'll get a 4 times damage buff, and then from that 4 times damage, they'll get a 150% buff on top of that. And so they'll be dealing uh, over 10 times damage before augmented and before accounting for viral procs. Now this, it's not quite as much, but of course you still have more augmented, so you eventually reach that amount of damage. I mean, you could also put power drift here, and you'd get very close to that. And I mean, this also still has like Archon shard slots, so I mean, do with those what you will. This isn't like supposed to be like a sort of like practical comparison to Oberon. At least that's not what I'm trying to show in the video here. Although I will mention that in a bit. But yeah, let me just show you how everything works here. I'm gonna get some energy. Let's spawn these enemies. So, activate, that's great. Oh, I have them pause. Okay, so, Terrify. Everything is affected. And I can just basically nuke them. There was only like one guy who got away. It's funny. So, really good. But also, now that I've killed some enemies, I can spawn my shadows. So let's do this. And then, as soon as I spawn them, I'll buff them with Nourish. And as you'll see, they deal some good damage. I mean, that guy's dead. That guy's already pretty decently damaged. I mean, they're taking a lot of damage from the viral AoE. And when they're targeted, most enemies will just kind of melt. There's an exception for like, I'll say there's somewhat of an exception for the heavily armored enemies, but not really. Enemies just take a lot of damage from this. And then I can also terrify them, and I mean, look at that. I mean, you can almost see why I don't use creeping terrifying stuff on my version of the build. Like, as you saw, like I wasn't even taking very many hits. Let's heal these guys again. I wasn't even taking very many hits. And also, uh, these guys can kind of just melt enemies that are terrified. And so, as like they're running away normal terrified, like of course I would just uh sort of like nuke them like that. But also anything that gets away, these guys can just pick off, which is really nice. So yeah, that's my Necros. So now I'm going to swap over to my Oberon for comparison. Like, let's keep in mind some of these numbers here. So let's look at the power strength, 180% power strength then, with a damage buffing subsumed ability. Miko. Anyway, 183% power strength with damage buffing ability. I am pretty tanky with Shield of Shadows, which will increase my augmented. Desecrate is just, good extra loot and everything. And it helps power up my extra energy. So, just really good energy economy on this build. And I have 35 meters of both crowd control and what's it called, armor removal. Right, so let's go over to my Oberon. Now let's look at this statistically as well. So this is my Oberon build. So as you see, it's high range, high strength, and I use Roar plus Howled Reckoning. Now if you notice, I don't have any effective hit point boost on it. So I don't have Vitality. I could technically put Arcane Blessing here, but I don't have Desecrate, like Necros does. I can get health orbs from Reckoning, but it's worth noting that Howled Reckoning no longer will cause health orbs to spawn. I don't know if that's a bug, but nonetheless, Howled Reckoning no longer causes health orbs to spawn, and so for enemies to drop health orbs, they have to either be killed by Reckoning, or I have to rely on my companion for that. I mean, I don't have synth set on my. Well, I don't have synth deconstruct on my Cavet, but I could if I wanted to. So I wouldn't be able to stack it up as quickly, although of course once it gets fully stacked, it doesn't really matter. Unless I were to die, of course. But yeah, it won't stack up as quickly. Also, like and also just like sort of like, I guess. Well, yeah, if we're comparing this to like the version of the Necros build I showed, it's definitely like way less tanky, even if I were to do that, just because the armor from Renewal just won't compare to the damage reduction from Shield of Shadows. So overall, less tanky. Right, and there's also less crowd control here. So technically, it's a bit more range. So as you can see, the radius is a bit above Terrify, and that's really because of Howled Reckoning. So radius is a bit above of Terrify, but you just get much less duration. Terrify was 25 seconds, whereas Reckoning, it's a knockdown, and knockdowns only last 4 seconds. Now, of course, there is the radiation proc, which is much more of a soft crowd control. But overall, you're just going to get just the tiniest bit more range with a whole lot less duration. So overall, I would say that is less crowd control. You also get less range on the armor removal. So while Reckoning's radius is larger, you're going to get less range on Hallowed Ground, which is required for the armor removal. Now, another thing about Hallowed Ground is that it is more of a circle or disc shape than a sphere. So I'm going to actually show you something here. I don't know why this happens, but uh, oh, I meant to pause AI. Let's just get heavy gunners. All right, so uh, let's see. I want to pause and let's go. So I'm gonna stand right here, high ground, and uh, it's worth knowing that when my molt augmented is what they call it, stacked up, I get armor removal in 2 casts. Right, so as you can see, this gunner got her armor removed, and that one, basically all those in a line. See, I don't know why this happens, right? So I put the hollow ground here. I cast twice, and gunners just in this line got their armor removed. I think that one was done by like Gavad, I don't know. But yeah, you can see it's very inconsistent, even like across the whole effect range. Like, I'm gonna put this down again. You'll see that it it visually reaches, but it doesn't affect everywhere. It's actually affecting less than I previously saw it do. Like, look, it affects over here. You saw that, but it's like it's in a tiny patch. See that? Again, I don't know why this happens, but this is it's very much worth noting because it's just how the ground is inconsistent. Like obviously, like it's not meant to be spherical. So like I cast it down there, it doesn't reach up here. That makes perfect sense. So it's lesser in that sense, but it's also inconsistent in this sense where, you know, enemies where it's supposed to be affecting just don't get affected. So yeah, it's considerably lesser in terms of armor removal. And of course, like, in terms of damage buff, the helmet ability is interchangeable. So I could put Nourish here if I wanted to. I think Rourke works best for this build, whereas Nourish works best for Necros. You could interchange them because these are both helmet abilities. Either way, I do have less strength. I mean, I have growing power here, so technically this build has more strength. But I mean, my exoskeleton Necros was empty, and I was using Brief Respite here. You know, if I was using my preferred version of the Necros build, I'd also have 2 strength mods, so that would be more strength. And so basically, no matter how you really compare it, the Necros is just going to have the Necros just has like more room for strength, at least in that context, than this particular Oberon build that I'm showcasing. And you know, that's also while having room for EHP buff. So I had Shield of Shadows on that Necros, and my closest comparison, as I said, is basically the armor buff from Renewal, which, as I said, it's just not as good. And if you notice, I basically don't have room for armor buffing on this build. Right, so I mean, not armor buffing, for just something like vitality on this build. So I mean, I could take out range, I could take out efficiency. Both of those would be huge losses. So the best thing that I could take out here would be intensify, right? So if I do this, one thing worth noting is that I would need basically my full augmented buff and growing power active in order to get full armor removal. And that only works because I have this Crimson Shard here. So I don't remember the group of enemies I used for Necros, but I mean, if we just look at the difference here, let's just do 2 casts. Because I'm like right by these enemies, it's you know, it's working consistently. So yeah, that's what I get out of that. Let's just get rid of these guys. And then I'll show you how it is with what do you call it? With Umbral Intensify. Let's spawn these guys again. So that. So as you can see, considerably more damage. I mean, look at that. Basically nothing died, but it's just a whole lot more damage taken. I think they should all die here. Close enough. So, considerably more damage, right? I don't really... Like, I could do it, but... I don't really have room for it, especially if I'm trying to like compare to like let's say Necros or even better yet, like let's say like some sort of AoE damage frame like Saren, right? The whole point that I'm really trying to show here is that if you're looking at sort of individual stats, even as like a sort of like package deal, there's a lot that you have to be able to do with Oberon in order to actually make him worthwhile. So, for instance, if I wasn't dealing good AoE damage, what would be my reason for using him over Necros? The only reason that I would have at that point is to give my allies some healing and armor. Right? Now let's say I'm comparing him to Saren, right? So Oberon is definitely not beating Saren at AoE damage in any sense. So, and of course Saren can use what's it called? Terrify. So she can remove armor if she needs to, and everything. I'm not gonna like show a Saren build for that, but you know she has AoE damage. She has armor removal. She also has what's it called? Venom dose. So, well, she has Venom dose and she has Toxic Lash, so she can buff her damage quite a bit. So in that sense, why would I want to use Oberon over Saren? Well, let's not also forget that Saren has what's it called? What's that? That augment, regenerative mode. So she can also heal herself. So in that sense, you'd only really want to use Oberon over Saren if you're going for, let's say, like a tame buff or something, right? So Oberon doesn't have to use... Well, Oberon innately has like team healing, plus of course Phoenix Renewal. So I mean, I guess I could show you. Well, it's not an AoE damage build, so. But yeah, he innately has healing that can apply to his team, and because he doesn't need Terrify, he doesn't need his Sumo ability to remove armor. He can use another damage buff and another like team damage buff because you know Toxic Lash that only applies to Saren, and of course Venom Dose needs an augment just as well, Venom Dose is an augment just as what's it called? Smite Infusion is. Where is my Smite build? Okay, yeah, just as Smite Infusion is. So they're kind of equal in that sense. It's Radiation versus Corrosive, which is an interesting comparison, but because Oberon doesn't have to use his Helmet ability, he could use something like Nourish or Roar in this case. So that's why you'd use Oberon over Saren in that case. you want AoE damage, but you want uh team buffs on top of that. Well, AoE damage, armor removal, and team buffs. So you see that's three different things that you basically need to have in order to be worth using over a different frame. You know, if you lose the basically in either case, if you lose the damage buff, you really lose that value, I guess. And let's switch to a different loadout, one that I'm more willing to swap stuff around on. So basically, uh, what you'll notice like across all my builds is that all my builds are, I guess you could say, multitasking builds. And I would also say that the vast majority of them are also glass cannoning, mainly because there just isn't really space to fit stuff. Uh, so, so it's like, you look at this build, it's like, what would you replace with vitality? Like a very sort of baseline level of survivability boosting, or I guess in this case, you might actually be better off with uh, umbral fiber or whatever. But I mean, look at this. It's like, what would you be able to replace? You could, I suppose, replace auger reach, which, uh, which I mean, you could kind of do, right? Because uh, you would, because this kind of offers you survivability in the sense of like giving you shield gating. Of course, it's not a full shield gate as I showcased in my Ice Blade video, but it's enough when you have all this crowd control. And so it is quite a significant loss of survivability in order to get just a different form of survivability. And so I would argue that, so I mean, you could argue that it's worth it, but I would say probably not. So, I mean, I'm gonna showcase like all these builds at some point. I just need to like sort of like finish other builds for the abilities. So like, uh, uh, Gloom, for example, I need to actually get some more Archon shards for this Oberon right here. Once I do that, I'm definitely going to be doing a Gloom showcase, which is my favorite ability on Oberon, by the way. Anyway, uh, you just have to. Well, I was saying you have to do a lot more, and that often means sacrificing survivability, which basically equals ease of use in most contexts. All right, so as you can see, I generally survive off of like partial shield gating plus Phoenix Renewal. I'll either use one of them or both of them, and just like never really anything more than that. Nice thing about Phoenix Renewal is that it is also a team buff, so it's like just by having it active, I'm saving my teammates from death if necessary. Which is part of the reason why I use it so often. But yeah, like there's very rarely a space for what do you call it? For survivability. And of course there are exceptions. So like there's my airburst builds, right? So I got full umbral on them, and with more augmented, I do get that full armor removal. It's basically the same as my other builds, except it's just like I guess umbral set focused instead of what do you call it? Instead of I guess augments and stuff. So yeah, that works really well, but this is like kind of like the exception because if I'm not going for max efficiency plus high range and just the one cast armor removal, it's not going to. This is, by the way, like this is also very shard enhanced. So normally uh, I would. So like normally I do need like corrosive projection and stuff to do that. So it's a very specific sort of build to like get all that value at once, which is why I decided to do it as my first showcase. And so if you're not like if you're basically not doing this exactly, uh, you really have to sacrifice something significant. Either you have to sacrifice something significant, or you have to bring out Archon shards. So I mean, if we look at this, you can see I removed some stuff because my Archon shards really helped me reach the strength threshold without actually needing to use corrosive projection. Uh, but yeah, otherwise, like you will. So yeah, either you got to use like basically that exact build, or you got to bring out Archon shards to make up for uh, the difference in what you sacrifice. Uh, so so yeah, that's something. So yeah, that's really something to keep in mind. Like, there's also my other exception being my tank builds, and I admittedly quite struggle with actually coming up with builds for this. Uh, as you can see, like the only one that I've showcased so far is this one. I mean, I have other good builds on here like Ultra, which I'll also showcase when I have the ability. Uh, when I have like other builds for the ability on finished on other Oberons because I want more builds for it. Uh, but overall, it's really hard to make good builds that are tanky. You can see this, you know, these are just Umbral set builds, and it's just harder to get a comparable value out of them. It's like it will generally seem like something is is lacking until I really get it just right. So like most of my builds, especially like most of the ones that most of my builds like in terms of quantity and in terms of what I actually use are very glass cannon. It's like, I mean, look at this for example. I'm using the Gladiator set, which is like a sacrifice of EHP in comparison to like Umbral set, but I'm getting a whole lot of damage out of it. Oops. I'm getting a whole lot of damage out of it. I showcased this yesterday. You can check out my Nourish video if you want to see how both of my Nourish builds work. Uh, so so yeah, basically my point is you have to do more with Oberon in order to get value out of him. That's my whole point here. Oh, and one thing that I want to explain earlier. So, uh, so basically, I explained why you would oftentimes want to use Necros over Oberon. There's a very good reason for that, right? Uh, so naturally, Necros is just more popular, like I said, for good reason. And now the fact that Necros is more popular actually uh, directly hinders Oberon because uh, a lot of his value comes from renewal, right? So I explained, you want to basically do more with Oberon than, other frames. Otherwise, you know, you're going to be doing a combination of things that another frame can do better. And so a lot of Oberon's value comes from renewal, like especially if I look at Which Oberon is it? No, it's this one. Yeah, especially if I look at these builds, most of them have Phoenix Renewal on it. Because that death protection is really good, right? Especially if I also look at my tank builds, you're also going to notice a lot of these have Phoenix Renewal on it. Death protection is really good. Remember, it's a team buff, so it's a really good value to have. And especially on these builds where like it's more meant to be tanky, I invest more highly into strength, and so the armor buff and everything is also improved too. So again, I do think this is very much worthwhile with like sort of the right, I guess, package deal. But uh, the fact that Necros is generally a better choice for similar purposes is going to directly devalue Oberon because Shadows of the Dead is going to directly hinder Oberon's renewal. So, let's say you're not using like maximum efficiency, and let's say you're not doing what I do, which is what I often do, which is using sharpshooter. So in that case, you're likely going to struggle to keep your energy up, and so uh, you could have very good energy economy just in a standard sort of general sense, but you kind of need extra in order to deal with having a Necros around. So either you have to invest more heavily into your energy economy, or you have to sometimes accept that you won't actually be able to have your renewal active all the time, right? And in that case, like let's say that you basically can't use renewal, which is often the case on my Gonk build here. Uh, you're going to really struggle to find value with that. And so, as I've probably said multiple times already, I think Oberon is worth using, uh, in a very, like, I think he's worthwhile in a sort of objective sense. But uh, it's really a struggle of balancing out his of struggling out like the different way he can bring value to a squad. So you have to first of all be able to bring multiple sorts of different values that are actually like a good combination within one build. And then like also in like terms of like a gameplay standpoint, like I showed you some of my better builds. Like let's go here. Oops, Miko, please. So I showed you like sort of some of my better builds. I have my AoE damage build. I have my Ice Wave build. I'll eventually showcase my Gloom build. You know these these are all builds that kind of take a significant amount of attention to you. They're all pretty glass cannon. Uh, I mean, this this one is like comparatively easy because you're going to be slowing enemies so much, but you still shouldn't be taking hits in quick succession. Otherwise, you're just dead. So you know you can. I guess the way to put it is you can survive like reliably when you know how to do it, but it's not necessarily going to be easy for everybody to do. So yeah, it's a balancing act of like the different value that he can provide, plus just being more difficult in terms of gameplay. And then you also have to keep in mind that you might have to prepare specifically for having certain allies that are just going to directly hinder you, particularly Necros. I think Revenant also does it too. I've seen my energy drain super fast around Revenants occasionally, but it's rare. I don't know exactly how his thralls work, but again, it's something worth keeping in mind, particularly with Necros, who has a whole lot of overlap with what Oberon can do. Uh, so, so yeah, again, I think Oberon is unpopular for good reason. I think he's a great frame, but it makes perfect sense that he's unpopular, and it and because of like sort of like the mechanics with Necros and renewal. Well, the mechanics of renewal uh, when affecting Necros, it almost becomes a sort of like self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, because like sort of the fact that Oberon is less popular him makes him worse in a way, which is which is really weird. Like it would be really weird, like I guess logistically, but like that's how it applies here. So I'd actually say that it's almost like using a sniper, right? Well, snipers, uh, you kind of have to be good with them. Like Paragale, for example, you you're basically trying to constantly hit headshots, especially in a burst, like the whole burst being headshots, right? So you have to be good with them, but you get a lot out of snipers when you actually are good with them. Uh, and so it's sort of the same thing for Oberon, except with snipers you're getting raw power. With Oberon, you're kind of getting utility. Uh, utility that kind of like works with threshold. So it's like you know you're getting like uh, our mode doesn't really go above 100%. So like you're getting like a sort of consistent amount of armor move in comparison to other frames. Uh, and so like you're adding other value on top of that, or you're using Phoenix Renewal or something, and so you're getting like a very well scaling amount of survivability, and then you're trying to add something onto that. So yeah, I don't think I really have anything else to add to that. Let me think. Um, so yeah, it kind of makes sense why I also like use snipers so much. It's like snipers, they reward you for a skill in one way, and then Oberon rewards you for a skill in another way, and they both actually complement each other a lot. You can particularly see this in my Ice Wave video where I think I was using a sharpshooter paragale uh, with uh, with my Ice Wave build. That was really cool, no pun intended. Uh, yeah, so last thing I want to say, unrelated to like the whole Oberon thing, I am actually working on doing a sniper showcase. So basically what I've done is I've gotten at least one ribbon for every sniper. For most snipers I have two, and like basically I'm trying to really work on like min-maxing my build, and I'm going to do like a big comparison video for them. Uh, Unfortunately, I think I might have to build a second Paragale just because of like the variety of builds that I have here. So it's like you look at how like I could possibly. What did I do to this? Oh yeah, I was testing something with that. You can ignore that. But but yeah, I don't think there's a way that I could like polarize it so that I can fit like all these builds with Exilus. So I'm gonna have to build like a second Paragon. I'm gonna have to build a second, what's it called? Rubico Prime. I can't find it, but yeah, I'm gonna have to build a second Rubico Prime. It's kind of painful, but um, yeah, I love my snipers, so I guess it's worth it. And then like I said, I'm going to be doing a big comparison video. I think that's going to be quite cool. Uh, I basically use like all of them actively with like one or two exceptions. So yeah, I'm just like working on them, really trying to do like an objective comparison. I think that's going to be cool to see. Anyway, I'm basically rambling as usual, so I'm going to end it here. I hope you guys enjoyed.